The letter was never supposed to reach my hands. It was hidden so deep, in a place no one would ever look, and yet 48 years later, it found its way back to me. I was 68 years old when my past came knocking on my door quietly, softly, like a memory that refuses to stay buried. It happened on a dull winter afternoon, the kind where loneliness echoes louder than any sound in the house. I had decided to clean the old wooden trunk that had belonged to my husband, my Michael, the man I lost almost 5 decades ago. The trunk sat at the back of the attic, untouched for years. The wood had grown darker, the metal edges slightly rusted, and the smell of old books and forgotten time floated around it. I wiped the dust away, my hands trembling not from age, but from the weight of everything that trunk represented. Inside it were pieces of a life I had spent half a century trying to preserve. I began pulling things out slowly. His worn-out navy blue sweater, the pocket watch he fixed 1,000 times even though it never really worked, a faded photograph of us from our first year of marriage, his arm wrapped around me, both of us laughing at something I can no longer remember. I was about to close the trunk when I noticed something odd. The bottom panel looked different, raised ever so slightly as if hiding something underneath. My heart thudded heavily, a strange mix of curiosity and dread. I pressed my fingers against the wooden board and it shifted, a secret compartment, one I had never seen before. Inside it was a single envelope, yellowed with age, the edges brittle and curled. Dust clung to it like it had been waiting decades for someone to find it, and there, in handwriting I would recognize anywhere, were two words, for a leaner, my name, written by the man I loved with all my life. My breath caught. The world around me blurred, and for a moment I felt like I was back in 1975, holding his hand as life slowly slipped out of him. Back then, he tried to speak, tried to tell me something important, but the words never came. Had this envelope been his unfinished sentence? My fingers shook violently as I lifted the letter. The seal was intact, untouched, hidden so carefully that even I, his wife, never knew it existed. Why did he hide it? Why didn't he give it to me when he was alive? What truth could be so heavy that he chose silence over confession? The attic felt colder suddenly, the air heavier. I sat down on the floor, the envelope resting in my lap like a sleeping ghost. For the first time in 48 years, I realized something terrifying. There was a part of my husband's life I never truly knew, and whatever it was now staring back at me from inside that letter. I didn't open the letter right away. I couldn't. It felt like it was pulsing in my hand, like something alive, like it carried a heartbeat from a past I didn't know existed. For 48 years, I believed I knew every corner of my husband's soul, yet this envelope suggested otherwise. I held it up to the dim attic light, and the paper looked older than any memory I had, fragile, thin, almost ready to tear at the slightest pressure. But the strangest thing was the weight. It was heavier than a single sheet of paper should ever be, as if the truth inside had its own gravity. Why would Michael hide something from me? Why make a secret compartment? Why seal it so perfectly and never breathe a word of it? I stared at the handwriting, his handwriting looped and steady, not rushed, not fearful, almost deliberate. My throat tightened. This wasn't an accident. Whatever this letter held, he meant for me to find it, but not then. Not in 1975, not while he was alive. But why now? Why 48 years later? I stood up slowly, the wooden floor creaking beneath my feet, each step sounding like a warning. I wanted to open it right there, right then, but something inside me whispered, not yet. I needed answers, not shock. I needed context, not confusion. So I carried the envelope downstairs, holding it to my chest as though it could slip away. The house felt strangely unfamiliar as I walked through it, like the walls themselves were waiting for me to discover what they had always known. I placed the envelope on the kitchen table, but I couldn't sit. I kept pacing back and forth, my heart beat out of rhythm, my breath shallow. Every possibility stabbed at my mind. Was it a confession, a warning? A goodbye he never managed to speak, or something far darker, something he was protecting me from? I forced myself to breathe. I thought of the days we spent together, the mornings he kissed my forehead, the nights he held my hand until sleep pulled us apart. He was not a man of secrets. He hated lies, and that made all of this infinitely worse. I finally sat down, the chair legs scraping the floor loudly, like the sound of a door closing behind me. My fingers traced the flap of the envelope again and again. The seal was old but unbroken, waiting, patient, like it had been watching me grow older, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. A sudden thought struck me so hard I froze. What if the envelope wasn't meant to be opened? Not by me, not by anyone. What if I was never supposed to see it? But then why write my name on it so clearly? Why hide it so carefully? Why lock it away instead of destroying it? Nothing made sense. The truth sat inches away from me, but my hands refused to move. The letter had waited 48 years. And now it was waiting for me to be brave enough to face it. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The letter sat on my dining table like a silent intruder, too quiet, too still, too full of questions that refused to let my mind rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael's face, not the man I remembered, but a version of him I had never seen, a version who hid things, a version who kept secrets from the woman he swore he'd never lie to. By morning, the sun crept through the curtains, but the house still felt dim, like the light couldn't touch whatever truth was living inside that envelope. I made tea, but my hands trembled so badly the cup almost slipped. I kept looking at the letter, and the letter felt like it was looking back. Something inside me whispered that opening it now would be a mistake, but not opening it felt even worse. I walked toward it slowly, one step, another. My heartbeat matched my footsteps, fast, sharp, uneven, but just as I reached out, I heard it. A faint creaking noise from the end of the hallway, a sound this old house hadn't made in years. I froze. The hallway was empty, silent, still. But the sound had been real, a soft, dragging creak, like someone had pushed a door that hadn't been opened in decades. My heart began pounding harder. There shouldn't be any unopened doors in my house. Yet something compelled me to walk down the hallway, slowly, cautiously, every step a question. Halfway down, I noticed something that made my breath hitch. A thin line of dust on the floor, interrupted by a faint trail like a smudge. A smudge leading toward the storage room, a room I hardly used, a room I never locked but always kept shut. My chest tightened. The door was slightly open, just an inch, but enough to show it had been moved. I reached for the doorknob, my hand shaking so violently it almost fell back. The metal was cold, too cold, like it had been touched just moments earlier. I pushed the door gently. It creaked open reluctantly, as though resisting me. Inside was darkness, thick, still, heavy darkness. I stepped in, feeling the air shift, an unsettling, unexplainable shift. Nothing looked out of place at first. Old boxes, a broken lamp, suitcases from trips decades ago. But then something caught my eye, a corner of the wallpaper, just one small corner peeling away, barely visible, almost invisible. But behind the lifted edge, I saw something so unexpected that my knees nearly buckled. A wooden plank, not wall, a hidden panel, another secret compartment. One secret was shocking, two secrets from the same man. My breath stuttered. What else had Michael hidden? How many layers of truth had he buried? And why was I only discovering them now, exactly 48 years later? My hand reached for the peeling wallpaper, slow, shaking, terrified. Whatever was behind that panel, I knew it would change everything I thought I knew about my husband. And yet, I kept pulling. The wallpaper tore away with a soft ripping sound, releasing a faint smell of old wood and trapped time. My hands shook as I peeled it further, revealing a wooden panel, smooth, dustless, impossibly clean compared to the rest of the room. Almost as if someone had touched it recently. My breath caught. I wasn't sure whether it was fear or anticipation tightening my chest. The panel had no handle, no hinges, just a faint seam. I pressed my fingertips along the edges, searching for a loose point. The wood was firm, cold, and oddly polished. Why would Michael hide something here too? And why go through the trouble of making it this perfect? As I pressed along the bottom edge, the panel suddenly shifted. A click, soft but unmistakable. I stepped back, startled. The panel creaked open by itself, a slow, uneasy movement that made the tiny hairs on my arms stand up. Inside the opening was a small, narrow space, not big enough for anything valuable, not big enough for anything dangerous, but definitely big enough to hold something he didn't want anyone to find. I leaned closer. There was a box inside, a wooden box, dark mahogany, carved with delicate patterns I recognized immediately. It was the same pattern on the jewelry box he gave me on our first anniversary. My heart sank. Why would he use that pattern here? Why hide this box separately from the letter? And why hide anything at all from me? My hands trembled as I reached inside the wall, the rough edges scratching against my skin. I pulled the box out slowly, feeling its weight, heavy, solid, almost unnervingly significant. It had no lock, no clasp, just a sliding lid. A lid I wasn't sure I wanted to open. For a moment, I stood frozen. I could hear the soft ticking of the old clock in the hallway, each second feeling like a question pressing harder into my mind. Finally, I slid the lid open. Inside were three things. The first, a small photograph. A black and white image of Michael, young, maybe in his 20s, standing beside a woman I did not recognize. She was holding his arm, smiling, close, far too close. My breath hitched sharply. Who was she? On the back of the photograph were the words, "Before everything changed." My hands shook violently. The second item, a tiny silver key, old, worn, smooth around the edges. A key that looked like it belonged to something important, perhaps something locked away long before I ever met him. My heartbeat thudded painfully. The third item, a folded piece of paper, thin, yellowed, edges frayed with time. My stomach knotted. Another letter. This one didn't have my name. This one didn't have any name at all. I unfolded it slowly, terrified of what I might find. But the note wasn't long. It was short, almost too short, just 6 words. "If she finds this, tell her everything." My knees weakened. Who was she? What was I supposed to be told? And why did Michael hide instructions, like he knew this moment would come? I stared at the two messages now in my life. The letter on the table downstairs and this hidden note. My husband had secrets, real secrets, and I had just stepped into the center of them. I couldn't move. The note trembled in my hand, the six simple words echoing in my mind like a warning bell that refused to quiet. If she finds this, tell her everything. Who was she, me, or the woman in the photograph? The room suddenly felt smaller, the air sharper, as though the walls themselves were leaning in, waiting for my reaction. I stared at the photograph again, at the unfamiliar woman smiling beside my husband, the man I thought I knew better than anyone. Her expression was warm, comfortable, familiar with him in a way that made my chest sting. Michael looked younger in the picture, his eyes brighter, his shoulders straighter, his smile unguarded. That smile, it wasn't the one he gave me. It was one I had never seen. My fingers tightened involuntarily around the photograph. Part of me wanted to throw it away, another part desperately needed to understand. Who was she? I turned the picture over again. Just those four chilling words before everything changed. Changed how? Changed when my thoughts raced to the silver key. It was small, old, belonging to something ancient, something hidden. The weight of it felt wrong in my palm, almost like it didn't want to be held. What could it open? Where did it belong? And why did Michael hide it in a wall behind secret wallpaper instead of keeping it near the letter? None of it made sense. I placed the box down carefully, sat on the floor, and forced myself to breathe. My heart hammered so loudly I could feel the pulse in my throat. Everything felt unreal. I tried to remember if Michael ever mentioned another woman. He hadn't, not once, but there were moments, quiet, fleeting moments, when a shadow crossed his face. Times when he held my hand tighter than usual or stared too long at nothing, as if haunted by something he couldn't speak of. I had always assumed it was the war, the trauma, the losses he carried, but what if it was something else, something or someone? A sudden gust of cold air brushed across my skin, making me shiver. The storage room window was closed, yet I felt the draft as clearly as if a door had opened. I looked at the photograph again. Something about the woman seemed familiar, not her face but her eyes, her posture, her softness. It nagged at me, tugging at the corner of some forgotten memory. I tried to push the thought away, but it kept circling back. Had I seen her somewhere before, in an old newspaper clipping, a photo album, or in Michael's eyes? My throat tightened painfully. Maybe the letter downstairs held the answers. Maybe the truth I feared was already waiting for me to unfold it. But another part of me recoiled at the thought. What if the truth was worse than my imagination? What if knowing it shattered not only my past, but everything I believed about my husband? I stood up, holding the key, the note, the photograph, feeling the weight of all three. There was no going back now. Michael left pieces of a puzzle scattered through time, and for the first time in 48 years, I was beginning to understand. He never expected to take this secret to the grave. He expected me to finish it. I walked out of the storage room with the photograph in one hand and the tiny silver key in the other. The note, "If she finds this, tell her everything," echoed inside my head like a heartbeat I couldn't silence. For a moment, I just stood in the hallway, unsure which mystery terrified me more, the hidden letter downstairs or the hidden woman in the photograph. Both felt connected, both felt intentional, and both felt like they were waiting for me to take the next step. I turned the key over in my palm. It was colder now, much colder than before, almost as if it had been pulled from ice instead of an old wooden box. The surface had tiny scratches, grooves shaped by decades of turning in a lock I didn't recognize. What lock could it belong to? I knew every inch of this house, every drawer, every cupboard, every cabinet, or at least I thought I did. But now I wasn't sure I knew anything at all. I walked slowly to the living room, searching for something the key might match. My eyes scanned every corner, bookshelves, drawers, old chests, forgotten boxes, but nothing looked locked. Nothing looked strange, nothing looked secret, until my gaze landed on something in the far corner. Something I hadn't noticed earlier, the old grandfather clock. It hadn't worked in years, not since Michael died, actually. Almost as if it stopped the moment he took his last breath. For 48 years, it had stood silently, frozen at 11:06. I walked toward it, each step heavier than the last. The clock's wooden frame was smooth, its glass dusty but intact. A strange sensation crept through me as I traced the outline of the clock with my fingers. Why was I suddenly drawn to this? I knelt down and examined the base. That's when I noticed it, a tiny, almost invisible keyhole, the exact size of the silver key. My breath caught in my throat. Had this always been here, or had I simply never seen it? My fingers shook as I raised the key to the lock. I hesitated. The house felt unnaturally still. The air thickened around me, pressing in like a warning. What if opening this wasn't safe? What if the clock hid another truth I wasn't ready to see? But curiosity curled around my fear like a vine, pulling me forward. I pushed the key in. It fit perfectly. A A soft clicking sound echoed inside the clock's sharp metallic final. The kind of click that meant something was unlocking, something long sealed. The wooden base shifted slightly. A hidden compartment. My pulse raced. With trembling hands, I pulled the small panel open. Inside was a single object wrapped in cloth, tied with a string so tight it looked almost painful. The fabric was old, yellowed, stained with age. I lifted it out carefully. It was heavier than it looked, much heavier. My breath grew shallow as I untied the brittle string and unfolded the cloth layer by layer. The last fold fell open, and what I saw made the room tilt. A locket, not mine, not anything I had ever seen. I picked it up. My fingers froze because engraved on the back in small, delicate letters was the woman's name from the photograph, and underneath it a date that was impossible, a date from a time when Michael and I were already married. The locket felt like it was burning in my palm. I turned it over again and again, refusing to believe the engraving, refusing to accept the date carved so delicately into the metal. June 14, 1974. The year before Michael died, the year we were still together, the year he held my hand every night and told me I was the only woman he had ever loved. Then why was this locket engraved with another woman's name and a date from our marriage? My throat tightened, the room swayed. I forced myself to breathe, but the air felt thick, sticky, resistant, as if the truth itself didn't want to let me inhale. I slowly opened the locket. Inside were two things on the left. A miniature photograph, Michael and the same woman standing closer than ever, her head on his shoulder, his eyes softer than they ever were with me. My fingers trembled violently. On the right, a lock of hair, dark, curled, preserved for decades. I felt the blood drain from my face. Why would he keep something so intimate, so precious, so hidden, and why bury it behind a wall inside a clock? I sank onto the floor, the locket dangling from my shaking hand. The silence of the room pressed into my ears until I could hear nothing but my heartbeat, fast, frantic, uneven. A thought crept into my mind, unwelcome but unavoidable. What if Michael's life before me never truly ended? What if a part of him, a part I never knew, lived in shadows, in hidden boxes, in secret compartments? I looked at the locket again. The date, the engraving, the intimacy. Everything screamed one word: lies. But something inside me resisted. Michael was not a cruel man. He was not unfaithful. He was not capable of deceit, at least not the kind that breaks a heart in one strike. So if he hid this, it wasn't betrayal, it was fear. Or guilt or protection, but protection from what? The letter downstairs, the note in the secret box, the photograph, the key, this locket, all pieces of a story I wasn't meant to know until I was old, alone, and far from the life we once shared. Suddenly a memory flashed the night before he died. Michael had squeezed my hand with unusual force. His eyes were pleading, desperate, full of a hidden pain I couldn't understand. He tried to speak. He tried to tell me something. But the words never came. What if this trail of secrets was what he had been trying to reveal? I swallowed hard and closed the locket gently, afraid it might crumble from age or truth. I needed answers, real answers. And only one thing in the house could give them to me now: the letter on the dining table, the one addressed to me, the one sealed for 48 years, the one I had been too afraid to open. My knees felt weak as I stood. Every step toward the dining room felt heavier than the last. The shadows in the halls seemed to shift as I walked by, as if watching me, as if waiting. The letter lay exactly where I left it, untouched, innocent, deadly. I sat down. My fingers hovered over the seal, and for the first time since discovering it, I knew, whatever was inside that envelope was not just going to answer my questions, it was going to rewrite my entire life. I stared at the final line of the letter: "Forgive me, Alina, I had no choice." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier, my heart beat louder. For 48 years, I had lived with the comfort of believing I knew my husband completely. Every smile he gave me, every night he held my hand, every promise he whispered, they all felt real. But now, a single hidden letter threatened to shatter the entire timeline of our marriage. I folded the letter slowly, as if closing it would silence the questions screaming inside my mind. But nothing quieted, not tonight, not after this. I walked to the old wooden desk where Harold used to write his poems. The drawers were still filled with his fountain pens, dried ink bottles, yellowing notebooks. Everything unchanged since the day he died, everything except the truth. As I placed the letter on the desk, something strange caught my eye. A thin line of dust was broken, as if the desk drawer had been opened recently, but no one had touched it for decades, except my hands trembled. Could someone else have known about the hidden letter? I pulled the drawer. Inside was a small metal key, one I had never seen before. Not a house key, not a car key, something older, flatter, almost antique. "What were you hiding, Harold?" I whispered. The walls felt like they were listening. I sat down, holding the key tightly as memories flooded in. The night he died. The way he squeezed my hand, the way he tried to speak, the way his eyes filled with a fear I didn't understand. Back then, I thought he was afraid of dying. Now I wondered, was he afraid of something else, something he left behind for me to find? The key grew heavier in my palm. Suddenly, thump, a sound from the hallway. I turned sharply. The house had been silent for years. My children lived miles away. No visitors, no neighbors dropping by at this hour. Was it the wind or someone moving? My breath shortened as I stood up, clutching the key. Every sound echoed too loudly. Every shadow looked unfamiliar. I stepped slowly toward the hallway, each footstep a question. As I reached the doorway, my eyes landed on something that froze me. The attic door, the one that had swollen shut years ago, was slightly open. A cold shiver ran down my spine. The attic was the only place Harold ever told me never to go, and now, 48 years later, it stood open as if inviting me inside or warning me to stay away. I tightened my grip on the key. Whatever truth my husband had hidden, whatever secret he feared was waiting for me in that attic, and I knew, once I climbed those stairs, my life would never, ever be the same. The attic stairs creaked beneath my weight, each step sounding like a warning. For years I had avoided this climb. Harold always insisted the attic was just storage, yet he locked it every night quietly, carefully, as if sealing away a living thing. But now the door had opened on its own, or someone had opened it, and I was finally going to see why. The air grew colder the higher I went, a cold that didn't feel natural, more like the kind that lives inside old secrets. At the top, the attic door hung open just an inch, not wide enough for someone to slip out, but wide enough for someone or something to slip in. I pushed it gently. The hinges groaned like they hadn't been touched in decades. Yet someone touched them tonight. The attic was dark except for the thin moonlight sneaking through the dust-covered window. Shadows stood like silent guards around the boxes and old furniture. Then I saw it, a small travel trunk, not dusty. Recently moved, my heart thudded as I approached it. The metal lock on the trunk, it was the exact shape of the strange key I found downstairs. My fingers shook as I inserted the key. It slid in too smoothly, as if waiting for me. Click. The sound echoed unnaturally loud in the silent attic. I lifted the lid slowly. Inside, wrapped in old fabric, lay dozens of letters, hundreds maybe, all addressed in the same handwriting. Harold's, but they were not addressed to me. They were addressed to Eleanor Marie Thompson, to be opened only if necessary. But I had never seen them before, never received a single one. Someone had been collecting them, hiding them, saving them here. Why? I picked up the top letter. It was dated 1973, 2 years before he died. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. My love, if you're reading this, then I have failed to protect you. I fear the past I escaped is finding its way back. I fear he has found me again. I froze. He. Who was he? Harold never mentioned an enemy, never showed fear, never looked over his shoulder. He was calm, gentle, peaceful. But this letter felt like it belonged to a different man, someone fighting a shadow that followed him across years. I read on. You must stay away from the attic. If he discovers the truth, if he discovers what I took, you will be in danger. I felt my knees weaken. What he took from whom, and why was I only discovering this 48 years later? Suddenly, a soft thud behind me. I whipped around, heart pounding. A figure stood at the top of the stairs, still, silent, watching me, not moving. Not speaking, just watching. The moonlight fell across the floorboards but didn't reach their face. I felt my throat tighten. Who are you? I whispered. The figure took one slow step toward me. The floor creaked. And then in a low, trembling voice, it said, "You weren't supposed to open that." The attic felt smaller now, colder, as if the shadows themselves were holding their breath. The figure stepped forward and finally the moonlight caught her face. My heart stopped. It was a woman. Wrinkles carved by time, eyes filled with fear, and a trembling mouth that looked like it had never spoken the truth before. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said softly. "I'm here because I was the one who hid the letters." I felt the world tilt. "You," I whispered. "Why, who are you?" She swallowed hard. "My name is Margaret," she said. "I knew Harold long before you did." My stomach nodded. A past lover. A friend, someone betrayed, but her next words shattered every assumption. "He saved my life," she said, "and he paid a terrible price for it." She walked slowly toward the trunk, touching the letters as if touching ghosts. "In 1970, before he met you, Harold worked for a man who was dangerous, very dangerous, a man who traded secrets and lives like currency." I clutched the edge of the trunk. "Who was he?" She closed her eyes, her voice quivering. "My husband." The attic froze around us. Harold had been protecting her from her own husband, and in doing so, he had become a target. "When I escaped," she continued, "Harold took me in. He hid me. He protected me. My husband vowed revenge and said he would destroy the woman Harold loved most, me." I felt the air leave my lungs. "That's why he wrote the letters," she whispered. "He wanted to warn you without letting that man trace anything back to you." Tears blurred my vision. All these years, I thought Harold kept secrets from me, but he was keeping me safe. "Why come now?" I asked, my voice shaking. Margaret pointed to the attic door. "Because he's gone, my husband. He died 2 weeks ago." Her eyes softened with guilt. And when he died, I knew it was finally safe for you to know everything. I lowered myself to the floor, feeling decades of confusion melt into painful clarity. Harold didn't hide the letters because he didn't trust me. He hid them because he feared the world that chased him. He died protecting me. He died carrying a secret that was never meant to hurt me, only save me. I picked up the last letter from the trunk, dated one day before Harold's death. His handwriting was weak, but the message was strong. My Aliner, I pray one day you learn the truth. Not to fear it, but to finally understand how deeply I loved you. If you are reading this, then my fight is over. Live your life, my love. Live it without fear. A tear fell onto the page. I looked at Margaret. She placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You were his peace, she whispered. I closed the trunk softly, not to hide the past again, but to release it. For the first time in 48 years, I felt my husband's presence not in secrets, but in truth. I stood up, wiped my tears, and walked out of the attic, not broken, but finally free. And that was the night I understood. Some secrets destroy you, but some save your life.